Tiffany, thank you so much for taking some time to hang with me today. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome, David. I've been looking forward to this. We got along like a house on fire last time we spoke.
It was super fun. All right. So I want to go back to your childhood. All right. Which is only 18 years ago, probably, not too long.
I still feel like a kid.
Good. I tell that to my wife and she's like, okay, that's not good. Grow up, please, Tate. Please grow up. Were you kind of more of a rough and tumble kid that was, I don't know if you had siblings, like brothers that kind of beat on you, or, I mean, this is so stereotypical, such a stereotypical question, but I'm going to ask it, you know what I mean? Like I was the kid that didn't want anybody to touch me. Like, just stay away. Like, I'm good,
Yeah.
Were you kind of more like physical and rough and tumble?
I really like that you asked this question because I've never been asked it before and I've never really thought about it before. And when I think of how people that meet me now as Tiff the boxer, I do a lot of business networking, and one of the most powerful thing I do is tell people who was Tiff before this, because when they connect those two stories, they're like, oh, you realise the perception that a female boxer has. And you're like, oh, well, you were totally different to me. You must be like this type of person. You've had this type of childhood. So no, I was a fiery kid. I was a very free-willed, free-spirited kid. I was very, but no, not physical, and I wasn't a fighter, and I wasn't in fights, and in fact, don't like confrontation. Never liked confrontation, and would avoid it at all costs. And in most cases, still do.
How would your either your mom or dad or whoever raised you, how would they describe you, would you say?
As a kid?
Yeah.
A handful, an absolute handful. So I do have a brother and he's 7 years older. And it's quite funny because my mum wanted her little girl. She had this beautiful little boy, but all she wanted was this little girl. And after 7 years and a couple of miscarriages, along I came. Her dreams came true. And I was a handful. So just think the kid, so she would often tell me, I'd get you both dressed. I'd get Ricky dressed and I'd put him on the couch and he'd sit there with his shoulders back, not moving. He was the type of kid that would cry if his hands got sticky because he was dirty. I was the little girl. She goes, I'd get you dressed. And I'd go into the other room to grab something. I come back one day and you were climbing on the stovetop, turning on the switches. Into everything. Could not take your eyes off me. I remember a story, actually. This is a favourite of hers to tell. My brother, she took us clothes shopping and for school clothes, and my brother was with us. And I was, of course, down in my little frilly frock, and I was down on the ground, sticking my head into the clothes racks. And I was like, Mum, look at this. Mum, I've stuck my head into the little triangle bottom rack thing. I want to show Mum that I've got my head in this thing because that's something to be proud of, Mum. Look, Mum.
Yeah.
She looks down and my mum was quite well-to-do and proper, and she's like, Tiffany, get up. Oh. And so I went to whip my head out and my ears were stuck. I couldn't get my head back out. So, of course, then I'm crying. They had to go down the road to where there were workmen working on the road. They had to bring their tools up and they had to dismantle the clothes rack to get my head out. So that was me as a kid.
So do you feel like your head was like kind of like bigger than average as well, or was that
it's just the ears got stuck, like I'd find a way to get it. I'd find a way to get into things.
Yeah.
Wouldn't think about how to get out of it. Wasn't a thinker-headerer.
Funny thing about big heads, when my son, who's now 18, when he was, a younger kid, his head was a little bigger. And so they were concerned that, oh my gosh, he might have some sort of disease or something. And so they measured his head. It was really off the chart. And they said, the number one way we can tell if his head is average for genetics is if you go home and measure your husband's head. If it's above a certain amount, we know your kid's totally fine. She came home and she's like, trying to measure my head. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And so she does it. And I don't even remember what the measurement was, but she goes, shoo, your head is huge. Okay, our kid's okay now. I was like, okay.
Oh,
great.
that's so funny.
Yeah. Funny. Big head.
Yeah, I don't have an abnormally large head. No, maybe my
Doesn't
ears
look
just stick
big.
out too much.
Yeah, it doesn't look
I
big.
mean, it's not. It's metaphorically, it's huge. A huge head at times.
So let's talk
Uh,
about boxing. How did you get into boxing? I mean, was your family into like fans of boxing? Marvelous Marvin Hagler just died a few days ago. I don't even know if you know who he is. Do you know
yes,
who he is?
yeah.
From
I
the
did hear
80s?
that.
Yeah, he
Yeah,
just passed away. I was sad. Yeah, he was a boxer I watched as a kid growing up. But
yeah.
were you into boxing as you were growing
Nah,
up, or was this something new
nah.
for you?
In fact, after I started boxing, it only occurred to me that when I was a teenager, one of my friends was dating a boxer, and I remember going to an event and watching him, and I couldn't watch. I was like, I can't watch this. This is awful. This is
Yeah.
brutal. I couldn't watch it. And I remember times when one of my boyfriends was into the UFC fighting and and I could not watch it. So it's quite interesting. I got into boxing at the ripe old age of 29 because at 29 I was still running around like a child doing things for attention, seeking attention, David, believe it or not. But I I was working in corporate, and I worked in corporate. I worked in the print industry in sales, and I'd moved from Tasmania, which is a little state in Australia. I'd moved from Tasmania to Melbourne to live in the city, and I went to a talk on resilience. And this talk was delivered by someone who's been on my podcast, Paul Taylor, and he's a neuroscientist, and he's been a former Navy aircrew officer. He's done all the interrogation training. So he delivers this talk on resilience. And after that talk, we go downstairs into the gym facility, and there's this beautiful functional movement gym. And I still do a lot of the stuff that those guys taught us. But underneath, there was a basement boxing gym. And on the wall of that gym, there was this poster that had these two dudes in corporate suits wearing gloves, and it was advertising Executive Fight Club 12-week challenge. And I was like, I like doing things chicks don't do. So do chicks do this? Can I do this? I'm going to do this. Yeah. Great idea, Tiff. Great idea. So off I go. Off I
Wow.
go. Throw my name
And
down.
I don't even think we can say that word chick anymore. So, like, I'm just going to edit that out. This is like an explicit podcast now. Okay. Women.
Lady.
Yeah. So,
Lady boxers.
so were there females who were boxing in this program, or were you the first?
No, I wasn't the first. There were females doing it. And so I signed up, and away we went, 12 weeks. Now, before that, I had done a handful of classes at the local PCYC club, just the fitness boxing classes. I remember being there in flailing my pale pink gloves around, thinking to myself, and I'd never say it, I was a very shy person back then as well, very, very introverted, very shy, not much confidence. Definitely wouldn't find me dead behind a microphone speaking to anybody, that's for sure.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. That's why boxing for me has just been a powerful, powerful tool. But one of two, and we'll talk about that. But I remember being there, hitting the bag and thinking, I just wish that Susie or Roy, the trainers, would come and tell me that I've got it and that I should fight. Like, tell me, hey, you should do it. You're good. You should do this. And like, I wasn't good. I was flailing around with pink gloves. Like, I was same as everybody. But in my mind, I had this fixed mindset where you can't just choose something. This is what I grew up thinking. You can't just choose something and learn it and do it and be good at it. You will have a talent, or you won't have a talent, and someone else will tell you. So that's what I was waiting for. But when this challenge came up, and it was kind of framed in this event thing where it was just a whole bunch of fun and anyone can do it. Like, that's literally 0 to hero. You don't need any experience. I was like, that's my jam. I'm doing this. Terrifying.
So during those 12 weeks, like, were you learning, obviously you're working out. Were you working out before that? You were a fit person, or?
I had just started I'd done a lot of Bikram yoga, and I started to go to the gym and do stuff. But I was never very committed. So I didn't have any sporting background or any level of dedication. I didn't have personal trainers. I just kind of went and I would do different things all the time. So this was definitely a huge step up. So this took me for 12 weeks we were training most nights, so every night of the week, and obviously learning strategy and getting it. And you're taking people from zero, so you got to teach me how to throw a punch. Then you got to teach me about movement and fight strategy and how to move my feet and how to block a punch and all of this stuff. I remember a couple of weeks in, and I told everyone straight up. Everyone in the world knew that I was doing this because I had a big mouth, and we were standing. I was standing in front of who'd become my friend, one of my friends, and we had to learn the first part of defense. So hold your gloves here, high on your head, and as the person floats their arm across, because we weren't doing full punches for this drill, it was just as that person floats the punch across to your face, what you're going to do is turn and just block the punch and keep your eyes forward and open and all of that stuff. And of course, I just had this enormous lump in my throat that I was like, this is so confronting. And every time that punch came at me, my eyes would close. I'd spin right around, and I couldn't control my movements or my reactions. And for me, that was very confronting, and it triggered me a lot. And I just remember thinking, I didn't ever cry in front of people, but I thought, as soon as this, I'll hold on to this, and as soon as we're out of here, as soon as that bell goes, I'm out in my car, and I'm going to have a big cry about this. I'm just holding it in by a thread. It was terrifying, and that was what the 12 weeks was like. And obviously with the voice inside my head telling me in no uncertain terms, you are ludicrous at this. Ludicrous. So, yeah, it was a big moment. It was a big
I can't even, I would close my eyes too. Yeah, for sure. The only thing that I have in my head about boxing is my dad telling me that when he was in high school, they did a boxing class or something in PE, and they actually boxed. And he said it was the longest 2 minutes of his entire life. It was horrible.
Yeah, like, wow.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. I would be closing my eyes too. I can't believe you have to keep your eyes open. I see that. But okay, so you get through it though. You stick with the 12 weeks, is that right?
Yep.
And at the end, did she finally say, Tiffanee, you've got what it takes?
No one said that. So this event was held by a different trainer. So there was no Susie or Roy. There was Dale. Dale was a world champion boxer and kickboxer. So he had a great reputation. I remember we only sparred 2 times before we got on the ring in that fight night. Now, when we went, that fight night was a huge black tie event with hundreds and hundreds of people sitting at the tables, and it was aired on Foxtel. So we're talking huge cameras, huge lights, just like your professional fight nights. So there's a lot of bells and whistles. And the girl that I was going to be fighting, she was a very fit personal trainer at the gym, and she didn't train with us. So everyone else was training with everybody, and we all got to mix around and fight, and spar them and get to know them. And she wasn't. She was training, and she was training with the boys in her own time because she was a trainer and couldn't train at the same times. But she had told everyone that she's got it easy. She's hits harder than me. She's stronger than me. She's fitter than me.
Are you wearing headgear? Whatever you call it?
No.
Your head is exposed.
Our head is exposed because there are professional fights and there are amateur fights. And for these corporate fight nights, because of the structure of the event, they need to be held as they need to be held under the professional code, and the professional code is no headgear.
Okay.
Yeah, no headgear, and usually smaller gloves, but I think we had the little bit bigger gloves for our fights. So yeah, funny thing though, I prefer no headgear. You kind of get used to it. Headgear gets in the way, and it brings your face closer to the punch, and it's kind of annoying. So not a fan of it. But I remember the moment. I know I'll jump back and forward with things I want to tell you, but you talked about that 2 minutes. I remember getting into that fight, and the bell goes and we start. And I remember at 20, I reckon it would have been, felt like 20 seconds. It was probably 10 seconds in. I was like, rah! And in my head I thought, oh, I can't keep this up. This is so hard. I'm going to have to back it off.
Were there 2 minute, it was 2 minute rounds?
Yeah, 2 minute rounds, 3 2 minute rounds. And I started, so I thought, I better back it off and just be a bit, defense was never my thing. So if I backed it off, my offense was my defense, and that's all I had. So when I backed it off, she clocked me for a couple, and I was like, all right, that strategy's not working. I'm just going to have to weather it, So I had to, but yeah, I remember clear as day that moment of thinking, whew, I'm empty, and we're like 20 seconds in. It feels like a lifetime, and yet it's over in a heartbeat.
And so what happened? Tell me about those three. Did you make it did she knock you out? Did you get to three
Definitely
rounds?
not. No, didn't get to 3 rounds. Won it in 2.
No way.
Yes.
TKO,
So
or did you knock her out?
TKO. So I'll take it. Let me wind back. I'll wind back to the day of the fight. So we get to the day of the fight, and I didn't get to sleep because I went ping the day before and realised that there was going to be some anxiety about this that hadn't hit me yet. And so the night before I went to bed, and I did not get to sleep until 6 a.m.
Oh.
And I had to get up at 7 because I had to go to the airport and pick my mum up. So I got 1 hour sleep to go and do this fight that night. And then take my mum out for the day, and the poor thing, I was just, I couldn't converse. I was just like, sorry. Yeah. I was just, I don't know, this level of anxiety I'd never, ever felt before. And I said to her and everybody, there is no way on earth I will ever do anything like this again in my life, because there is nothing that could ever be worth how I feel right now. And I meant that. I was like, there's nothing. Not $1 million, not anything. And so we rock up. I remember we rock up to the night, and it goes so fast. I remember the first thing I remember is sitting at the table watching fight number 1, which was my friend, and this was her second fight, and she won it. And I was like, yes! And then they hand her the microphone, and I was like, what? Oh, if I win this, which is obviously my goal, you want me to speak on stage to almost 1,000 people? I don't think so. So I was freaking out about that. It was the last thing you really need to be freaking out about before you go into this event.
Sure.
And then I remember watching a fight. Someone comes and they're like, what are you doing, mate? Like, your opponent's outside doing sprints. And I laughed, and they're like, no, I'm serious. And I was like, oh, I've got to go warm up. So it was just this mad rush. And I run out the back, and I get my gloves on, and, it's like your mind is 20 seconds behind what's happening, and you're getting swept off onto the stage, and I'm like, oh, fuck, wait for me. And then the bell goes, and we go in, and I had that feeling. And then the bell goes, and I come back to the corner to my trainer, and he's going, what are you doing? Why are you stopping? I go, what do you mean? I had no consciousness in there. I go, when she would stop the fight, when she would cover or fail to fight back and she would retreat, I would stop. He goes, you don't stop until the judge says stop, until the ref says stop. And I went, but I was like, I'm not aware that I'm stopping. So it was this trigger in my brain that when we're fighting, we're in this thing together and we're fighting. And then when you stop, we're just like, come on.
Yeah. There's a little break here.
What are you doing? Come on, you ready? So he wasn't even aware that I was doing that. But yeah, she didn't like getting hit. So yeah, she anytime she got hit, she retreated a lot, and they ended up calling the fight by the second round. So
wow, amazing. Absolutely amazing. Let's say, so you come out of that experience, you're like, swear it off, I'm never going to do this again. But yet at some point you obviously, I would think that winning kind of changes your tune about that too.
Wow. And not even winning, but going through it and the fight ending and standing, they hand me the microphone, and they had a job to get that thing back off of me.
Really?
I was not short of anything to say. I don't even remember what I said, but I had words. But I remember the feeling. The feeling was 10 times bigger than that awful feeling that I swore nothing was ever be worth. There was no hesitation. In that ring, I said, when is the next one? Sign me up. I'm here again. But the first big lesson, and I know that you'd mentioned this question to me before, the first big lesson that I learned, and I remember it because I remember standing in that room after the event, watching other fights, but having this processing in my mind, that first lesson was, wow, That was over in 4 minutes. And that took 12 weeks of constant discomfort, change, confrontation, doing it against my own inner critic, all of this stuff. I had to change my socializing. I had to change the way I eat. I had to change the way I rested. I had to obsess over this. I had to walk forward into things that were just so uncomfortable and confronting for me for 12 weeks for a 4 to 6 minute experience that to everyone else in the world actually holds no meaning. They turn up. Of course, they want you to win, but really it's meaningless. But to you, it means a lot. And I just went, that a penny dropped for me. I went, that's life. That's life. Anything you want, whether it's a work goal or a life goal or anything, is going to be 12 weeks versus 4 minutes. That's the work versus the thing. So the thing's got to be worth it, and you've got to put in the 12 weeks. There's no other way. There's no just rocking up to the 4 minutes without the 12 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know.
Which is why there were 1,000 people watching and 2 people in the ring.
Yes, right? Yeah.
Because they can vicariously somehow feel like they're experiencing the 4 minutes.
Yes.
But in reality, doesn't compare to what you experienced.
Yeah. And I guess that's why people get so passionate and so into sport as supporters. And so they really buy into it like it's their own.
So
which I never understood previously.
Oh, really? You weren't into sports until you really got into boxing?
And even still now, I'm not a huge watcher of sports. Mm-hmm. I'm a doer. Like I'd had at least 4 fights before I said to I think it was someone in the gym, I was like, I don't even know how boxing scored.
No way.
True story. I don't even know. Like I would go back to the corner and go, how'd I go? Because I don't know, because winning and losing felt the same because I was just in there focused on what I was doing. I wasn't focusing on what was happening. I was focusing on what I was doing. I was looking after that process, and I would wear a lot of punches, but you can't focus on them. So I'd have no idea.
Mm-hmm. So this whole idea of getting punched, like that just seems horrifying to me. I've never been punched. I've been punched in the stomach as a kid, but I've never been punched. I don't really want to get punched. It doesn't seem fun to me. So you're punched, obviously probably in sparring. That would be the first time you were punched.
Yep.
And what is that moment like? Are you like, okay, bring it on? Like, is it just create this adrenaline, or does it kind of shock you, or what did it do for you?
It definitely creates adrenaline. And like I said, I learned a lot about myself. And I didn't seek to learn it, but I learned a lot of big lessons about myself when I stepped into that boxing ring. And one of the first, and the reason I knew very quickly that something under the surface was happening that was resonating, that I didn't, it was a bit woo-woo for me. I was like, why am I doing this? I've never turned up to anything I'm not already good at. I've never continued on with it. My old boss's wife used to laugh anytime she come into the office. She'd go, oh, what are we doing this week? Yoga, running, like, what do we do this week, Tiff? Like, because I always do something different. And then I found this boxing thing that I was hideous at, and I kept going, and it was hard, and it was confronting, and it was uncomfortable all the time, and I was like, something's going on here, and I need to find out what it is. And it also brought it. I learned very quickly that for 29 years, I'd had this mask on that I'd worn, that even I didn't know what was underneath. And I believed that mask. And then I started asking questions about who I was. And then memories started coming up about childhood, about growing up, about who I am, about the identity that I'd formed. And I was like, what if that identity is not, this independent, strong-willed, certain, strong female that and they're all great traits, but what if I'm not that? What if I am so petrified like a punch in the face is not scary to me. It's scary to everyone else. Why is it not scary to me? And what's scary to me is people getting close, is people leaving, is people hurting me, is people breaking my trust, and then I was like, okay, there's some stuff here. So the boxing ring became my biggest teacher about me. And it's not until you put yourself into it, or for me, it was true. I put myself into an environment where reactions happen primally before I can write a story about them. So I go in, it's like I get to watch myself, put myself in there. All this happens, pull myself out, go home. Okay, what did I just see? What did I just see happen, and how else does that play out? Everything tells a story. Everything that happens in that boxing ring happens in my life,
Give
and
me an
that became
example. Give me an example of that. Like what is something that you felt like you experienced there? You talked about the closing of the eyes, but like what else did you experience?
my biggest one thing that I found out was one of my biggest strengths in there was the inability to emote. So there was no emotion. In fact, the first thing I used to say before I really got deep on the work was, God, I wish I could get, because I'm a Taurus, and like I said, as a kid, I'm a flighty kid, and if I get angry, I was like, oh, I wish I could get angry in the boxing ring. You know how strong you feel when you're angry at something and you just want to break something? I was like, if I could feel this in the boxing ring, I just feel like I'd be stronger. Like I'd hurt somebody. But I didn't really, like, when someone hit me, I didn't get angry. When someone hit me, I didn't get sad. There was no emotion. In fact, I remember a trainer saying to me once, we were training, we were doing some drill, and I looked at him and I said, I've just got nothing. I can't do this. And he goes, what? You look like you're not even trying. And I laughed, and he goes, no, seriously. And then I thought about it, and I was like, I've got this poker face. No one sees what's going on. And that was a strength in the boxing ring. But also I never emoted. I never had these emotional reactions. And that was something that had followed me through life. I didn't have emotions till a lot later. Now, David, between 2016 and 19, I had 3 years off competing, and I started a business and I was doing other stuff. And so I had 3 years of not actually competing in the sport, just training. But over that time, I'd gone and done a lot of therapy on this stuff that I'd brought up through the boxing ring, and I've gone, there's a bit of stuff here I should probably work through. When I and when I chose to work on it, part of me said, do you want to? Because that's going to change you. And that's going to so do you want to be a boxer, or do you want to be a human? What's more important? Mm-hmm. And I knew that when I worked on this stuff, that it was going to change the person in the boxing ring. So in 2019, I went back to my first coach and I said, I want to compete again. And I thought, I don't know who I'm going to be. Who am I going to be? I can't answer that question until I'm in there. And David, I was a different person. I felt emotions. I reacted emotionally. I flinched more. I had a less of a willingness to, without question, walk forward and just get pummeled and pummeled and pummeled. I would feel the punches more. And they didn't hurt, but I had this other level of self-care and self-love that I didn't have before. And it just interested me. And that's the stuff that's always interested me about the sport. I want a sport that confronts me, and I want a sport that tells me a story about myself. And I want something that uncovers, I don't even want to call them weaknesses, uncovers traits that can serve me outside in my life. I mean, boxing changed my life. When I looked back after 2 years of boxing, 2 to 3 years, I glanced over my shoulder at the rest of my life that I'd not focused on at all, because boxing was the everything. Everything else was just a second sideline. But everything else had improved. I'd gone from a disengaged employee to an engaged employee to an entrepreneur, a business owner, my own person. And all of that just happened. And that happened as a result of the stuff that had become behaviors and strategies and rituals and disciplines, and the way that I fed and fueled and rested my body, and the new mindsets that I'd learned, and the new things that I practiced every day in a part of this sport. Because all of that stuff, it's the same stuff. I've done talks and things to corporates on mindset, and it's been called the business athlete, because we're an athlete in everything. If we treat life like being an athlete, then we're going to compete well, whether that's work, business, relationships, life. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of become I call it my metaphor. I call it my metaphor for life.
Mm-hmm. you had these transformations outside the ring, inside the ring now, like, did you feel like that hurt your boxing career, as you started to compete again? Are you still competing now or just more
So I
training?
competed in 2019, and then we went in, and then I had about 5 or 6 months off. And then as I started to get back into it, we went into lockdown with our pandemic. We were in lockdown here for 4 months in hard lockdown. And only really early this year got back into the gyms being open. I've started the podcast now, and I'm doing a lot of different stuff. So probably 4 or 5 weeks ago, I said to my coach where I'm training, I train out of that. I'm a trainer at that gym now, I should say. And I said, I want to compete again. I want to fight again. And I did a couple of weeks of training every day and turning up for the sparring. And I was just exhausted, but I had this unwillingness to let go of this other stuff that is now very important to me. So the deep work didn't hurt my boxing. It changed my priorities.
Mm-hmm.
And so I value boxing, and I've always valued boxing, not for boxing's sake, but for the human development underneath sake. That's why I chose my last trainer, because he had that sense of, he's very, very tough. He was like $1 million baby tough. He was, I'll make you a champion or I'll break you. But underneath that, it was the human. He was dealing with, how can I make you a better, stronger human? He understands that this is about biomechanics and human behavior and the nervous system and how we react primarily. So he takes that approach. And I love that approach, because that's what we are. How do I do this physical thing? But there's all this stuff going on inside. There's, how we hold ourselves, how we react, all of these primal movements. And that stuff fascinates me.
And now you're actually training other people and doing boxing classes as well. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I do a 4-week boxing program, and I base it for beginners, because I love to teach. There's so much coordination to boxing, and there's so much. It's very overwhelming. And if you don't do it well, even just for fitness, you can injure yourself. You can feel silly. So I do a 4-week boxing workshop often, and it's aimed at beginners to intermediates, really, and just really gets them understanding their body and their movement, and just gives them that confidence to step out. So if they want to just go to the gym and hit stuff, they can, or if they want to move into competing, they're getting a really sound base level to do that. And I also just feel that there'll be a level of people coming into that aren't necessarily coming in wanting to do that, but they'll be like me. They're looking for that tap on the shoulder. And if they at least get this environment where they're taught this stuff and they're spoken to like with the strategy and something that tells them that I'm teaching you this because you might want to box, they'll get that message that goes, oh, I could do that. It's that tap on the shoulder.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think what's interesting is, and I don't know if this is normal or unusual, but I've seen some of your posts online, or maybe it was your website, where, it's not only boxing, but it seems like you also have this heart to cultivate community with other people, like where they're hanging out afterwards or something like that. That seems unusual to me.
Yeah. So I love that you mentioned that. So because I just changed the venue of my boxing workshop, and because the place I was holding, it was very expensive, but it took me a lot to change it because it was walking distance to a cafe. Now we do a 2-hour training session, and then and most people then come for breakfast. There was one day when we were at breakfast for 3.5 hours, and my participants were sharing some really deep vulnerabilities. There were tears, they were crying, they were talking about trauma. And to me, boxing became my family and my safe place and my connection. And that's what I want to draw in. I don't want to draw in people that want the bravado and the ego and, I'm a boxer. I want people that want to empower themselves with a skill and learn something and be better at it, and have people that connect and understand them. I love, the community. Community is everything. It's everything.
If I was in your class, I think I would suggest, hey, can we do the hangout first? and then the boxing, because I'd be like, I'm dead after the boxing.
Well, that's when they need the refuel. That's when they need the food.
Yeah, yeah. So fun. And then during the pandemic, you started a podcast called Rolling with the Punches. And I've had the privilege to have a conversation with you on that podcast. Why did you start the podcast? Like what's the impetus for this?
Yeah, so the reason I started the podcast, or what I wanted to get out of it, was I've always aspired to and been moving towards slowly, and probably 90% of my work prior to that was personal training and fitness, and 10% was corporate and speaking and events and that bigger stuff. But I really want to shift that, and I want to be out there speaking and running events and mentoring and doing the big stuff that really drives me and that really spreads a message. And well, look, I was fortunate that for the pandemic, I got the opportunity to train the Ambulance Victoria paramedics online. And as a part of the proposal I put to them as a company, I had what I called Feel Good Friday. And that was just like a social catch up, which within 3 weeks turned into me lining up when I looked at my 6-week lineup, I went, that's $30,000 worth of speakers, Australian and international speakers that I've lined up. And these are people just in my network that I know. Mm-hmm. And so I saw the value in that. And then I thought, as that was going on, I thought, this is an opportunity. Maybe I could save these audios, and one day, just when I got 20 of them in my bank, I'll just roll them out as a weekly podcast, and then I'll practice podcasting and I'll learn how to do that. And I'm an all or nothing person. So by the time I'd finished saying that in my head, I was driving to the gym with a couple of microphones in my pocket, and I'd thought of the name Roll with the Punches, and I thought, well, this is ace. And then, it's been 3 episodes a week since then. I'm up to 114.
Breathe a lot.
Yeah, it is. It is. But I've learned more than the 2 things I wanted to get out of it that I said to you before. I wanted to improve my communication skills. What better way than to communicate with people in a way where you know that there will be people listening, so it's a different level of communication. And I wanted to I've got a really great, strong network, but I thought that will bring me the ability to network at a higher level. David, Trotter, those 2 things. If I say in my head I was aiming for a 10 out of 10 of that, I hit 100 out of 10.
Wow.
That my comfort and skills and abilities as a communicator, I felt it, and I was told it. I have people ringing me, and 3 months down the track, going, "Oh, your abilities to interview have really improved." And I was like, great. I don't even know what their skills are. Like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do to get better, but cool. If it's happening, that's great. Yeah. But the people I've had on my podcast have been I just sit back and go, really? This is amazing, and now I get to connect with people all over the world like yourself. And I've just learned more than I could have learned in any course or any deliberate situation to go and learn. Like, I've learned so much, and I've evolved as a human. It's been amazing.
So fun. And so if you describe Roll with the Punches, like, what would you say is the heartbeat behind like what you're trying to do with the podcast, the people that you're interviewing, kind of what's the through line?
The through line is sharing stories about people who have rolled with the punches and sharing education and inspiration on how we can be better equipped to roll with the punches. Mm-hmm. So I have people from mates of mine, or people with no profile, to people with profiles that have been through and tell what it was, so people can relate. Oh my God, I'm not the only one. I'm not the only one. Oh, this person, this happened to them, and they've gone on to do this. How inspiring! And then also, science and epigenetics and psychology and all of the stuff that, how can we as humans, what better practices, what better knowledge can we have in order to maybe be more ready to live better, do better, be better. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's kind of broad, but it's kind of not.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I loved being interviewed by you. I thought you were just great because you're curious. You know what I mean? You're a lifelong learner. You're curious. You're fun. You're very accessible. Except I would say you're accessible when I see you like this. When I'm looking at the front of your website, I'm like almost wet my pants because I'm so scared of you. I mean, you look like you could just crush me. But I am 6'5", so I've got some arm length on
Yeah,
you,
wow.
perhaps that I could keep you at a distance, but I don't know. I still think you just one punch and I'd be done. I'd be down. Yeah, you look intense
Ah.
on the front of your website. You've got to go check out our website. Um, tiffanyandco.com.au. We'll put it in the show notes, of course. And Tiffany with the Tiffanee. Did that haunt you your whole life or like
It
as you were growing up?
until the moment when I got to register the business name Tiffanee and Co. and not get sued by Tiffany and Co.
Yes, that's very nice. It is very nice.
So eventually, by the time I was 30, whatever age I was when I registered that, I was like, oh, I don't mind the spelling of this name now.
So good. Yeah.
Thanks, Mum.
Awesome. Where else do you like to hang out online in terms of social media where people can follow you?
You can follow me on, I've got Tiffany and Co. on Instagram, and also Roll with the Punches _podcast is on Instagram as well. Both of those have relevant Facebook pages. I've recently started a TikTok, but I'm not that savvy, so I'm not sure. How. I'm not that active on it yet. I've signed up to Clubhouse. Don't use that yet either. You know, there's a lot already going on, but yeah, my main ones are Instagram and Facebook, and I try to be quite active on those.
We will link all of those places up and you can meet Tiffany's the love of her life. Uh
Oh,
he is it
she.
he my apologies. She is she's very hairy. I just didn't know you'd go for someone that hairy.
Well, each to their own, I guess.
What's her
I don't think
name?
I'll go for someone with a tail either. Her name's Coach.
She got some long nails too. Whew, man.
She's
Yeah.
fancy. She's
Yeah.
fancy.
Awesome.
She
Very
wears nice
beautiful.
eyeliner though.
What kind of what breed is she?
She's a whippet.
Whippet. Okay. Very
Yeah.
fun. Good, good.
Yep.
All right. tiffanyandco.com.au. We'll put all the links in the show notes. Tiffany, it's super fun to be with you. Thanks for sharing your boxing journey and the journey of your heart more than anything. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, David. Thanks, listeners.